So I know you went on like a really big backpacking trip recently.
Yes, John
Um,
Muir Trail.
and it was like a really long time, right?
23 days, so definitely longer than anything else I've ever
Mm.
done. So,
What like what inspired you to like go on such a long backpacking trip?
yeah, well, I actually got asked that a lot on the trail. And I think it all started March 2020, like when COVID hit. I'd never been backpacking. Um, my brother had done some backpacking when he was in like high school. And I was like, but it was only for boys, it was kind of like a Boy Scout kind of thing. So I always kind of had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do backpacking, but no one had ever brought me. And I was like waiting for what I called a camping mentor to come along,
Mm.
but nobody ever did. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to be my own camping mentor. And so that week that COVID hit and we were sent home from college, I called up one of my friends, Sophie, and I was like, do you want to go backpacking? And she'd also never been. She was like, sure, we can drag along my little brother, who was also in like a Boy Scout thing. So he was like the safety in case, we died. Like he would be, he would be there to make sure we didn't do anything stupid.
Mm.
Um, so we went for one night on just like on the Appalachian Trail. It's called Annapolis Rocks in Maryland, like nearby where I lived. And I loved it. I was like, I'm obsessed. So I started like planning my own backpacking trips in college, especially during COVID. There wasn't much else to do. So I took along some friends, and then I was just getting like more and more hooked on it. Then I moved to Yosemite in 2021. So that was the next year. And yeah, absolutely loved that summer. Had a lot of fun working there. But I met some people who had done the John Muir Trail, some of my coworkers, and they told me about it. And I was like, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. But I was about to start grad school that fall. So I was like, after grad school, I'm going to do something big. Um, and yeah, 2 years later, and got to fulfill that dream and go on a really fun long trip.
Yeah. It was just like having the like a transition, I guess, right? Having such a big
Yeah,
transition and like
having
having the
time.
time
Yeah.
to go for that. Um, so did it take a long time to plan out for a trip like this?
Yeah, I consider myself fairly good at planning, but I was overwhelmed, especially because I was also preparing to finish grad school, and that was a lot of work this spring and summer. But even, yeah, it's a 3 week trip. But even like having thought about it for the past 2 years, I still felt like it was overwhelming to plan because the John Muir Trail is kind of hard to resupply, like to get more food. Um, they recommend that you mail in boxes of food at the points that you're going to stop. And I was just overwhelmed. I was like, you have to pay a certain fee to send it. You have to compile all the food you want to eat. And then you have to pay a certain fee for extra days that you don't pick it up. So I was like, I just can't do it. So I actually like kind of gave up on planning parts of the
Mm.
trail. And also to get to some of the towns, if
Yeah.
you don't want to hitchhike, you need to book a ride. And I was like, I can't do it.
Wait, so for the food, was it like a post office for
Yeah,
food
stuff
specifically?
kind of like that. So the first town, well, I went south to north, so from south of Mount Whitney to Yosemite, so it's called northbound. The first place you could stop is the town of Independence. So yeah, it has like maybe a post office that you could
Mm.
send the food to, or maybe even straight to a motel you could send the food because
Mm.
they're hiker friendly. But I basically didn't do any of that because I was too overwhelmed by the planning, and I was like, I'm just gonna wing it.
Mm.
So I could have planned more, but even what I did plan seemed like a lot. So
Mm.
yes, it was. It did require a lot of logistics.
So for those who don't know, like the John Muir Trail is in California,
Correct.
right? Going throughout the Sierra Nevadas, you said?
Exactly.
And then what is the full trail distance?
So it depends where you start. The way it's intended to be hiked is from north to south. You start in Yosemite, you end at Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the lower 48. It's like 14,500 something feet. That's 210 miles.
Mm.
However, it's hard to get a permit from Yosemite because they just make it very hard. It's also hard to get a permit from Mount Whitney. So I started about 20 miles south of Mount Whitney. It's called Cottonwood Pass. And you get that permit from Inyo National Forest. And it's the kind where you just have to click really fast at 7 a.m. to get a permit, like 6 months in advance, instead of a lottery system. So it's easier to get. You just have to click fast. So that added distance. So I ended up hiking 256 miles the way that I did it. But it's about 210 to 250 miles.
You started off at Mount Whitney there? Like,
So I started south of Mount Whitney at this place called Cottonwood Pass. It's about 20 miles south. And then when we got to Mount Whitney, I did a day hike up Mount Whitney and back down. But if you started at Mount Whitney, you would start on the east side of it and kind of hike over the mountain.
Like throughout this trail, were you required to summit Mount Whitney, or could you just?
People kind of did what they wanted. I think it was really cool, and I'm glad I did it. But apparently, the John Muir Trail, you can still say you hiked it with or without doing certain sections. Like, it's kind of just up to you. So yeah, because I did it as a day hike, I technically did do the whole John Muir Trail. If I'd skipped it, then maybe I would have skipped a part of the trail. But yeah, it's really up to you. So.
14,000 feet is really harsh at the top, and like for like people that don't like have access to a lot of mountains where they live, like that could be a really big like shocker to the system. Would you say like you were kind of used to it before like hiking for such a long distance, or like hiking such a tall mountain?
Yeah, I definitely met some people who got altitude sickness, and they were having like shortness of breath and symptoms like close to having like heart problems. So it was concerning to see that. Luckily, I did not have any issues. I didn't even get a headache, which I was shocked, because every other 14er or every other high mountain I've done in Colorado, I've only done one other 14er, but I've gotten like really a big headache all day. And it was also interesting because we drove from Colorado to California, and so the day before we were at Death Valley, which is like negative 200 feet. So I was like, oh no, this is gonna be a big shock, because in a few days I'm gonna be at 14,000 feet. It's like the biggest differential you could do in US. But it wasn't bad. I think Cottonwood Pass started at around 10,000 feet, so the first 2 days before I got to Mount Whitney, I was kind of slowly hiking up. And I think coming from Colorado helped, like 5,000 something feet here. So
it's amazing how like fast the body adjusts.
Yeah.
But also, like you said, the headaches like at the beginning is very common for a lot of people too. Like just for like the first day or so, like it's very intense especially like if you come from an elevation that's really, really low. And so that's like,
yeah,
it's crazy that like so many people are doing this, but like you don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah, a lot of people from Seattle or Southern California. So props to them.
So like 210 miles within, you said 20 some odd days, was that right? So that puts you like, did you plan this before in terms of like mileage per day?
That was another thing that I got overwhelmed and did not give myself a day-by-day itinerary, because I just figured I would wing it when I get there. It's too much to plan. I don't know anything about the trail ahead of time. So I figured I would plan for approximately 10 miles a day, just give myself enough time to do it. And then if I needed more or less time, or I would figure it out when I got there. I figured that I did not want to be doing a very fast pace, because this is kind of my vacation, something I didn't want to do just to get it done as fast as possible. So yeah, my initial thought was about 10 miles a day. That didn't account for the fact that I would have to resupply and go get food, which I had no plan for, because I didn't plan that. So I was a little worried that I was gonna be too slow, but it all worked out.
Yeah. That's often neglected, like the rest days.
Yeah.
Or like where you're gonna find somewhere like a hotel or something, or a motel.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because you think like at first maybe you're hard-headed and you're like, oh, I can tough this through and I don't have to take any 0 days at all. I'll just go straight through. But the reality is like, wow, I've been doing this for a week or 2 weeks now. Like I need to have a rest, like, have a shower and have a bed again.
I definitely would recommend taking at least one day off if you have the opportunity to do a long hike like that.
Mm.
It was definitely much needed, and especially the day that there was a hurricane, it's good to take a day off. So
Mm. There's a hurricane.
yeah, so Southern California had a tropical storm, Hillary, I think it was called, while I was on the trail. And so the second week, there was probably a period of 7 days that it rained every day. It wasn't like all day rain, but there was a lot of thunder and lightning, and at night as well, there was some scary storms. Um, so everyone was talking about it on the trail. There weren't very many people on the trail in the first place because this was a high snow year. But the people who we did meet, at first they would say happy trails, but it turned into like safe travels, like be careful out there. So we got some advice to leave to Mammoth Lakes for 2 nights. So it was a full 0 day that I spent there while it rained. And that was nice to kind of get warm and have a nice bed while the storm was happening.
Yeah.
And then we got back on the trail and it was good.
We talk about all the logistics and gear that you have, but like, how do you know what gear you should have for a hurricane?
I know. I was not expecting any rain, to be honest. From what I had read, August is like completely dry and sunny and perfect in California, in the Sierra Nevadas, but that was not the case this year. So I didn't have a pack cover, so my pack would get very drenched, and then rain would like trickle down the back onto my pants, which is not very. It doesn't feel very good. But I did have a raincoat, and my tent, the inside stayed dry. So, yeah, I don't know if I would prepare any other way other than maybe bringing a pack cover. Obviously, have a rain jacket, but.
I think it's such a crazy concept, like backpacking on its own, because like you're going, like that is your home. That's
Yeah.
a normal home for however many days that you're going on the trails for. And it's like that's all the stuff that you have on you. And so like you better make sure that like that's the stuff that's critical and like necessary instead of like a bunch of junk or like
Exactly.
a bunch of like luxury items or something.
Yeah, for sure.
So was it like difficult like packing your pack and like making sure you had like prepared for all situations that you
I had slowly been accumulating gear since 2020. The first backpacking gear I ever had was just random stuff my dad's friend gave me, like an old slightly leaking tent and a pack that was kind of falling apart. But my philosophy had always been don't buy any gear, like just especially for the short trips that I was doing, like 1 or 2 nights before. I figured like it's not important to be ultralight at that point in time because you can survive anything for 1 night. So I tried to just accumulate stuff that people have given me. But for this trip, I decided that after 3 years, I really like backpacking. So I invested in a few key pieces of gear, like an ultralight tent, and I have a decently good sleeping bag. It's not the smallest, it's not ultralight, but a good backpacking sleeping bag. So a few items like that I wanted to make sure would be very good. But overall, I would say I was not anywhere near ultralight. And that's fine. You grow stronger and and then online you can read about everything that you might need for the trail so you don't forget some item. I was very happy with my gear overall. I don't think I would change anything. So
Yeah, ultralight wasn't even in my vocabulary until I got out west. Like,
oh really?
like out Midwest or East. It was just like you go out camping
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter how heavy your gear is, so long as your gear works, essentially.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more like rain out there, and
True.
so like you weren't worried so much about having fires and whatnot. Whereas out west
Yeah.
here, there's a big like argument about having fires because
Right.
you could start a whole forest fire essentially. And so like it's the culture, like backpacking culture out east versus how here in west is like so different. So I guess like out here on the trails, going through the John Muir Trail, which is in like really west there in California, were you able to see like a lot of different like climate patterns going through?
Yeah, it was different so I'm from Maryland and spent my first 22 years in Maryland. So like you said, very used to a lot of rain and living on the water. And basically, when you go for a hike, you are covered in deciduous trees and you do not see a single view until maybe the top of some kind of small 2,000-foot peak. And then that's kind of what backpacking looks like in Maryland. So it was very different to move out to Colorado and then to hike in California, just like sweeping views and kind of, yeah, like meadowy regions, and then like very, very rocky at those high mountain passes of like 13,000 feet, like no trees in sight at the top, and then like these turquoise aquamarine lakes and all the wildflowers. Very different from Maryland. More similar to Colorado, definitely. But I think there's something special about the Sierras for sure.
Mm-hmm. Because I know with like some of the longer trails, you can go through deserts.
Yeah,
And
no deserts on the John Muir Trail. The John Muir Trail is part of the Pacific Crest Trail, or it kind of runs the same path as the Pacific Crest Trail, which does go through the desert in Southern California. I was not so interested in hiking in the desert, so did not do that. But yeah, there are other terrains on the West Coast, but not in the Sierras.
did you get a trail name?
Okay, so there was like a lot of talk about trail names. I don't think anything ever quite stuck with me. So there was just like a list of many names that people tried to call me, so I can share those. The first being Mighty Mouse, because I'm 5 foot tall, and I had like a non-ultralight giant backpack, so probably looked like a mouse, but carrying a lot of stuff. And then I was called Mosquito Queen because there were so many mosquitoes on the trail. I think the rivers were very high because of the high snowmelt, so the mosquitoes came out late this year. And they were swarming everybody. They swarmed me too. However, they did not bite me. I think I got like
Did you
2
have one of
bites.
those
I did
face
not bring one, but pretty much
masks?
everybody else had a mosquito net. I don't even wish I had one. Like I don't know. They're annoying, but like luckily they didn't bite me, so that's why I was called Mosquito Queen, because they would go for everybody else. But they were still annoying. And then I wanted to call myself Grape because I found a grape lying on the trail on one very cold and rainy day, and so I ate it, and that just felt like a very large victory in the trip. But that didn't stick either. And also people want to call me Curious George because I like monkeys and I was kind of curious, but Curious George is the name of my first stuffed animal, so I cannot be called Curious George because, so yeah, so no like specific trail name that stuck, but there was a lot of brainstorming the whole way.
I was gonna say you got a lot of trail names.
Yeah.
I think usually people don't get that many.
Yeah, normally you
It
have
sounds like
one.
you have your pick here on whichever one you want.
Yeah.
Huh. I always thought trail names was fun because it's
Yeah.
just like it's usually some like inside joke or something, and going through it's just like some people are called smooth or whatever because they like shave their legs even if you're male, just so you can like, I don't know, you like take off
Be
weight.
fast.
You might like throughout.
That would take a lot of shaving. Most people did not shave at all on the trail, I'll tell you. Like, yeah, there was not any shaving occurring for anybody.
Yeah, speaking of like hygiene, like how, because I know, so 23 days, that is a lot of days,
A lot of
but
days.
it's not like months and months.
That's
And
true.
so like maybe you can bear through it, maybe not, I don't know. But anyways, 23 days is a long period of time. Like what do you do for like hygiene essentially, or do you just skip it until you go to like a rest day or something?
Yeah, I definitely could have been better, and I think the term hiker trash does apply. Like, we were all gross. Not as gross as the PCT hikers. Like, you could tell when you met a PCT hiker because there was a different smell. We were only, like, the John Muir Trail hikers, yeah, we were kind of, like, a little more gross than your average backpacker, but I did take 2 0 days, so after about 10 days, I stopped in Bishop, took a shower, and then for the hurricane, we stopped in Mammoth Lakes, took another shower. So it was about, 7 to 10 days at a time. And I had very good intentions of jumping into all the alpine lakes, but they're always colder than you think. So yeah, I think I sort of bathed myself in some kind of lake every 4 days, and I would wash my clothes in my bear canister maybe every like 4 or 5 days. So yeah, actually one thing I might have changed is I basically only brought one pair of clothes. Um, yeah, so they got really
we,
gross.
we just don't think about this stuff, like all this comfort and amenities that we have in our daily lives. Like when you're backpacking, like you don't have the ease of access like that.
Yeah,
And honestly, like there's no time to do all that stuff, and so you just kind of like go through it for a couple
yeah,
days more essentially in the same
yeah,
clothes.
yeah. I think one adjustment back to regular life is that you're supposed to change your clothes every day.
Yeah.
I don't worry, I've been changing my clothes. But like after not really changing at all for 23 days, I was like, oh, this is normal. But don't do that.
Yeah. So like I guess what did you learn? Because going through so many days and then like you said, adjusting back to kind of normalcy or
Yeah.
like civilian lifestyle, like because it's just such a big experience, right? Like not many people just go out in the woods for 23 days straight and
Yeah.
have that whole
Yeah,
perspective,
that's a great
right?
question. It was actually a lot of solo time. So a lot of reflection, a lot of prayer for me personally. I kind of saw it as like a prayer walk and kind of a period of like quiet between busy grad school and busy consulting job, which I'm in now. Um, and maybe some people would not call that rest at all. But for me, like, you're hiking alone for like 7 hours of the day. Maybe you're hiking with other people. It's sometimes or camping with them. I would do some of that. But for the most part, it's just you and your thoughts and God. So I spent a lot of time reflecting on, yeah, like things I want to see this fall and things that I've like appreciated, like a lot of praying for people and thinking about the people in my life. Kind of go through a list of different people in my life, and like things that I was praying about. And then like I also did a lot of scripture memory. I've been kind of memorizing the book of Ephesians this year, so I was a little bit behind after my thesis, and I wanted to finish it by the end of the year. So I did a lot of like reciting the book of Ephesians while walking, and it helped pass the time. I didn't do any podcasts or music, which could have been nice to have, but initially I was worried that my phone was going to run out of battery. I didn't know I was going to stop in towns and recharge it. So I didn't bring anything really to listen to. So it was kind of just, yeah, a time of like listening. And I think the biggest lesson to answer your question was trusting that I'm not a very spontaneous person, and the reason that I didn't plan very much was because I was just too busy. I couldn't mail those boxes of food, and I couldn't plan those rides to the town, and obviously I couldn't plan for a hurricane. Like, so I think learning to be okay with spontaneity, and for me personally, to trust God, and like to say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in the next like 24 hours. I don't know where I'm going to be. I don't know who I'm going to meet, and I just have to trust that things will work out. And people on the trail would call it the trail provides. I would say personally, God provided a lot on the trip, as far as people to hike with, because I was alone for part of it, and then I made a good friend, Tracy, who I finished the trail with. He provided as far as safety and the snow and the river crossings and all the things I was really worried about before the trip. Just seeing him tangibly respond to my needs helped me, I think, as I prepare for the fall with bigger needs, and praying for other people who also have big needs, to kind of trust him in the big things, because I could trust him in the small things every day on the trail.
Yeah, that's so much time to think, and like depending on who you are, like that could be like you can think a lot about negative stuff,
Yeah, you
or you can
can.
think or maybe if you're a busy person, you have some time to unpack, and that's a
Yeah,
positive thing.
yeah,
But it sounds like you had a good amount of time to like unpack and kind of like you said, go into that spontaneity mode instead of like planning for everything, which
yeah,
is fun, sometimes, right? Like so long as you like sort of planned a lot of your critical survival stop.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything completely stupid. I had a GPS device as
Mm.
well, to clarify. So I was not completely off grid.
Mm. But beyond that, like, the little things like where am I gonna stay, or like do I get a shower, like stuff
Yeah.
like that. You can survive without that. And so
Yeah.
that's where like the spontaneity is like really great for.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess you said you learned a lot about just like
Yeah.
um, trusting in God for providing. Do you think like there was days in which you saw that
Yeah,
more?
for sure. Like it was very tangible. I think the biggest story was how I met this girl named Tracy. So I was hiking by myself, and it was maybe like day 8, and that was when it started storming. And so from then on, I was getting a little bit nervous because I didn't know when the thunderstorms were going to happen and all that. So I just started praying to God, like, Lord, please, like, bring me someone I can hike with who will just be another person that we can go through this together. Um, and for 3 days, I basically met no one. Like in that middle section of the trail near Ray Lakes, which is like this beautiful section, I heard it's jammed with people. There was no one. Like I actually only saw one grandpa and a grandson who were fishing, but there was nobody. And I was like, God, like, what are you doing? Like, I'm praying for to meet someone. And then on the day that I was like, okay, I'm running out of food, I need to go into the town of Bishop to resupply. So I took an exit out Bishop Pass. I met a uncle, Uncle Pete, and his niece Tracy. And as soon as I saw Tracy, I was like, okay, I think this is it. And turns out Uncle Pete was not able to complete the hike. He needed to exit in Bishop, and so Tracy was planning to quit as well. And I said, Tracy, I don't know you, but do you want to hike together? And she was like, yeah, let's keep going. Turns out she had a ride to Bishop planned, like for that day. We had a motel, and she had a whole resupply of food that I could use as well, so I wouldn't have to figure out my own food situation. Turns out she was around my age, she's a nurse, she's also a believer, and we just really hit it off. So we spent the next like 12 days hiking together, and it was just cool to see like something I'd specifically prayed for, like everything be answered. And of course, my mom was very happy too to know that I wasn't hiking alone after that. And I think Tracy will be a good friend.
That's so crazy. So you started hiking solo?
So actually, the first 7 days I was with a friend, but she could only stay for a week. So she exited at Independence, the first town that I was talking about. So there was a period of 4 days. Or after that, I was planning to be completely alone for the rest of it. But I was hoping I would meet someone, so that's when like, after day 7, the thunderstorm started. I was alone. I was like, okay, God, like, I just need to rely on you for what happens next. It was definitely a tangible. Like, the verse I was thinking about before I started was, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. And I think I tasted and saw, and I definitely was taking refuge in him in some of the scary moments. So
Yeah.
I think it was definitely tangible.
Yeah. So part of it was solo, but part of it is with other people
Yeah.
as well. Because that's a wild idea. It's just like when you're going like through this activity in which that you're required to survive long periods of time in the wild. Who knows what you're encountering in the wild, whether it be like animals or just like situations where you don't feel so good, maybe you're sick, or just like knowing that having somebody with you is
Yeah.
sort of like that it's like a comfort thing, and also like an insurance policy as well, because they could like help you out,
Yeah.
right? And so like I've always like give props to the people that go solo backpacking.
Yeah, but I had heard really that if you go solo, you won't end up solo. Like you will meet people. So that's why I was so confused when I was solo. There was nobody, and I was like, God, what are you doing? But he was just preparing me for the right person, and just helping me exercise trust, I think. But yeah, normally on these long through hikes, they're called, people will make friends very easily. So I knew that I wasn't going to be completely, or I was hoping that I would not be completely solo, even though I was intentionally going solo.
Did you run into any crazy situations, or did you run into any like wild animals?
I think the most exciting animal story was, so we had these bear canisters that you put all your food in, And every night, you're supposed to put it a little bit away from your tent, and those will keep the bears from being able to eat the food and eat you. Not that they really eat people very often, but I was like, oh, like, I don't know. Not that I don't believe in bears, but like, I'm not really that scared of them. So that's why I wasn't, like, people like, oh, like, how could you do that alone? I don't know. Bears has never really scared me. So I was getting a little bit, like, lazy at putting the bear canister, like, right outside my tent. But Tracy one night was like, okay, let's put them, like, further away from the tent. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go walk over there. The next morning, they were not there anymore. And I was like, Tracy, where's the food? Like, what happened? We looked down the hill, and they had rolled down the hill. And some other stuff had been knocked over. And I went to go retrieve them, and there were claw marks all over the bear canisters.
They got into the food?
They did not get into them, but it's kind of made of plastic, so the lid is like a black plastic. So there's clear claw marks, and then Tracy had duct tape on hers, and it was like raked. So I was like, I'm glad it was far away from us, and that they tried to go for the food and not. We didn't put it next to our tent, so they didn't get tempted to come to us. So there were bears. I didn't see any, but they existed. The other exciting wildlife was when we were in Yosemite. We were in a car at that point, but we saw a mountain lion. And it was dark outside. We were driving down the road, and he just like came out, and he was huge. It was like probably my height. Like, he was huge, and had like red eyes because we were shining our headlights. I've never seen a mountain lion before, and I was like terrified. And my cousin, he rolled down the window because he didn't know like that you're not supposed to like do that. So we're like, he like put the window back up. Like, this is not an animal you mess with. But that was not while I was hiking. And the only I think the snow I was worried about going into the hike because this was a record snow year in California. It wasn't too bad. I was definitely grateful. I think the most scary thing was the thunderstorms. Which maybe doesn't sound scary when you talk about it, but yeah, there was just one night that the thunder and lightning were at the same time. I was alone in my tent, nobody for miles and miles and miles, and I was just like, I'm not sure how I'm going to make it through this night because it was just so loud and so scary. But I survived, and yeah.
With the situational thing, like seeing mountain lions or like bears, like you said, they are very clever and they could potentially get into your food resources, but it sounds like in this case they didn't, which is good. Like, that the bear can did his job. But beyond that, it's like, what about protection? Like, do you need some sort of weapon or something?
That's a funny one. So I mentioned that I hiked the first 7 days with my friend. So that night on the 7th day, when she left me, it was my first time ever being alone. Like, I've never backpacked by myself. So my mom bought me a small pepper spray. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll bring that. And then my roommate Sarah gave me a knife, and she was like, just a small pocket knife. So those were my only protection. And that first night, I put up my tent. I was like sitting eating dinner, and I heard a person, and I was like, and they were kind of just like standing like sort of near my setup. And I forgot that there was a stream there. So I was like, what are they doing? Like standing right there. And so I like carefully got out of my backpack my pepper spray that I had in one hand, and then I opened the knife I had in the other hand. I was like just sitting there like by my food. I was like, I don't know what that person is doing there. And then they walked over, and it was a nice old lady, and she was filtering water. And I was like, I had the hair, I was just like put it behind my back. And she's like, oh, how are you doing? Are you by yourself? Like, oh, we're right over there if you need anything. I was like, oh man, I was really overly scared. There was no situations where I felt like unsafe from people. I think everyone was super friendly. They were always willing to help, and yeah, so I don't think I needed to be worried about that. I mean, obviously good to be careful, but yeah, just the community of hikers was amazing.
No, I think you're being realistic about it. Just like, I think being scared and like being nervous all the time is not helpful if you're anxious about every little sound or noise or encounter. But at the same time, like being real, like, oh, it could be danger. And especially like if you don't know, like sometimes like a two-legged creature is more scary than a four-legged creature, meaning like humans can be potentially a lot scarier than like a black bear, for example, because like maybe they're just more skittish and you can just get them away pretty easy. Whereas a human, you don't know what they want. And so like, you know, there are sketchy people on the trails. There was that one guy on like the Appalachian Trail that was like running from the law,
Yeah, I've heard of
and he
that.
was like some fugitive that was going up and down, just to try to escape police and like the law essentially. And it's like you don't know if you'll run into people like that throughout your trail. Majority of the cases, if you don't like mess with them, then they won't mess with you. But like I guess how do you handle that? How do you handle like you could potentially run into like some really weird people?
Yeah, I guess that was kind of on the back of my mind, especially that first night when I was alone. Like, what would I do? I don't think maybe the pepper spray would help, but like if they were actually trying to come for me. But yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I've always been a flight person, so I'd probably just run away if possible. But yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's something you just can't worry. Like if you spend all your time worrying, you're just gonna be like super stressed the whole time. Um, yeah, I think just having like a good sense of, oh, if that person doesn't seem like a great person, maybe just don't camp next to them, or
Mm.
yeah, kind of there's enough space that hopefully you can avoid people. There was one night that Tracy and I were camping, and it was by a lake. And so we set up our tents, and then we went to go lie by the lake and just kind of relax. And we came back to our campsite, and there was just a man standing like right by our tents, just like standing there. And at that point, I was very glad that Tracy was with me because he wasn't like menacing or anything. He was like an older man, but like just the fact that he was standing in our campsite and there was so many other places to go was kind of odd. And he ended up camping right next to us, and we invited him to our campfire, and he was like, "Oh no," and then he just left the next morning. So he didn't really want to talk, but he also like camped directly in our campsite,
Mm.
which is kind of odd. And I was glad for numbers, like for having another person there in that case, but. I don't think he was actually a threat. Like he's just, I'm not sure what he was
A
doing
little
there.
strange.
Yeah, a strange
Yeah.
man.
Huh. So it must have felt like so much better to have another person with you. You
Yeah,
know, like who knows what could have happened or would have happened, right? In any situation, but like just having another person like with you,
yeah,
you feel a lot better,
yeah.
more reassured.
It was just a blessing overall. Like just getting to share the experience with another person and learning from Tracy.
Mm.
And there's other people we met on the trail. We kind of ended up having a little bit of a trail family. We'd kind of hopscotch each other and maybe camp some nights with a few other people, play cards, make campfires. So definitely the communal aspect was very rewarding.
Yeah. And how did you go about the food throughout like so many days?
So, yeah, so the first week of the hike, I did bring my own food. It was mainly like oatmeal for breakfast, and then like tortillas with either tuna or meat and cheese for lunch. And then I had a lot of ramen and nor rice sides for dinner with some dehydrated vegetables I found online. Unfortunately, I ended up really disliking my dinner options,
Mm.
and I didn't really pack enough snacks either. So, yeah, I wasn't really enjoying my food. It was kind of just like you have to eat to continue going.
Because that's what I think too. Because like if you're spending so much energy throughout the day and doing this thing that you're carrying like a really heavy pack on your body, and you're traversing various elevations, like at night you want something nutritious, right? Instead of a ramen or like
Yeah.
something carb heavy, right?
Well, I mean, I think the carbs overall were helpful to me. Yeah, I don't know very much about nutrition in general, so that probably would have helped. But yeah, the other godsend was Tracy, the girl I met. She had her own home dehydrated food, so it would be like her dad's pasta sauce recipe with like ground meat that she dehydrated and spaghetti, or like some Indian food from a restaurant that she dehydrated herself. And since her uncle had quit, she had a double portion.
Oh.
And so I ate with her the rest of the trip, and my food got way better. And I think she had also kind of calorie counted and planned a little bit more than I had. I really didn't try very hard. So yeah, things got better after the first 10 days of the trip.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, can you even enjoy your food, right? Because you're going through so long and you're packing sort of like what you're hinting to is like just food for function, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you even enjoy your
I
camping?
yeah, I didn't at first, but later on, I think maybe also I didn't have as much of an appetite that first week, which was why I
Maybe
kind
like
of
just survival mode.
yeah, I was definitely kind of in survival mode at first. I think it was like okay, dinner time, eat, go to bed, wake up, hike. Like it was very okay. Like I just need to figure out what's going on. But later on in the trip, we'd have like dinners where we'd all hang out around the campfire, and we had like different treats we would share with each other, and um, yeah, we like knew more what foods we had been craving. So when we were in the town, we were able to buy the Reese's Pieces and the
Hmm.
peanut butter M&Ms. Like those are always good. Like
Okay.
I ate them like the whole time. I still would totally eat them right now. So
Hmm.
like there's some foods that you know that you're gonna really enjoy. And you kind of learn that over time. So I think yeah, over the trip I became more confident, comfortable, and figured out what I was looking forward to and how to make it not just like a efficiency survival mode kind of trip and more enjoyable.
So originally, what like did you plan for specifically like 23 days or a little bit over 3 weeks, or could it have been any time?
I got the permit for a maximum of 30 days just to be safe, or maybe it was like 27. I gave myself some extra time, but I did actually plan, like, when I got the permit to start August 5th and end August 27th, which is exactly what we did.
Mm.
So I guess I planned pretty well. And that included, I didn't plan for it, but we ended up taking 2 0 days.
Mm.
So technically we hiked for 21 days. But yeah, I would have had more buffer time if necessary. Um, just in case. But yeah, I didn't really know going into it. Turns out we planned pretty well. So
Hmm. Do you think you could have, like, now having completed this almost month long backpacking trip, do you think there's a desire for more? Do you think it's completely gone now? Like, I don't want to, like, I'm good.
it's yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely addicted. Like
Mm.
through hiking, it was so fun. Like I don't know, it's just so simple, and you get all of that quiet time, but also communal time and beautiful nature. You don't have to worry about social media or your phone. Um, or emails or yeah, it was just a good period of time, and I would love to do more. And the people you talk to will tell you about the other trails they've done, and of course it's hard to not think about
Mhm.
oh, like I could do that sometime in the future. So yeah, it's definitely, I've heard that it's kind of an addicting thing. Like once you start through hiking, you want to do more. And then before you know it, you quit your job and you're a dirt bag. But hopefully I will not do that.
Yeah.
But maybe just some more, yeah, hikes in the future.
Yeah, like being having an opportunity, like you said at the beginning, to have reflection time, but also having an opportunity to disconnect too from things like social media or like your phone in general.
Yeah.
Like it's a really great opportunity for that, and it's like a breath of fresh air. Um, do you think do you think like you were like pretty deep into social media, or do you think like that was not too much of an issue?
Yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth with it, specifically Instagram. I've had periods of time. I kind of like to purge things, so I'll be like, okay, no Instagram this like year or something, or I only look at it once every Saturday, like once a week. Um, but then, yeah, I'll have periods of time where I'm like on it multiple times a day. So yeah, I've kind of gone back and forth with it, but it's definitely, I will say, it has its strengths, but it's very nice to not be attached to your phone, like on the trail. Yeah, just in general, like a simpler way of living.
Yeah, because it's just highlights, right? Because all you see are just highlights, and you don't see because your trip here could have been easily Instagrammable, right? But like they don't see about the behind the scenes
Yeah,
of the
this
sketchy people that come and like hi and like camp right next to you, or like the issues of food and like not having the most desirable food, like all this behind the scenes stuff
yeah,
is like what you don't see.
for sure. Yeah, I think once you I mean, I think you've asked great questions and you've also done backpacking before, but like to the average person, I would tell them, oh, I did the John Muir Trail. And they're like, oh, what's that? Like, oh, I hiked for 23 days, whatever, 200 something miles. They'd be like, oh, it's so fun. And I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, it was fun, but like that doesn't really describe like what the experience, you know? So to most people, they'll just, I mean, it's the same with anyone when you ask them about their vacation. Like, you don't tend to get to hear every single detail and you can't think of the right questions. But yeah, it's like an experience that can't be put in a little box of Instagram and like
Mm.
understood. Like, so yeah.
Yeah, which I think is great because like it's reality, and like it's really hard to like try to hide every single detail because reality is reality. And so like I think it's just so great that you like anybody could just disconnect for, 3 weeks straight.
Yes, I enjoyed it for
So like
sure.
I guess when coming back like to normalcy, like did you have any like cravings that you had missed throughout the trails, whether it be amenities, whether it be like your phone or anything like that?
So I did when I arrived in Yosemite. I was meeting my roommate and my cousin. So I did request brownies and grapes.
Mm.
So as far as food, for some reason, that was what I really wanted. Otherwise, yeah, there wasn't like particular things I was longing to get back to. I think I do enjoy like a consistent scheduled life um, with less surprises. Like,
Yeah.
as I said, I'm not really a spontaneous person, so part of me was looking forward to coming back to my home here in Boulder, like getting to go to church on Sundays and wake up and go for runs in the morning and um, yeah, spend time reading and get to see my friends and even yeah, was excited about yeah, starting a 9 to 5 job and kind of have that consistency. Which on the John Muir Trail there was some consistency, but there was also kind of like no idea what's going to happen, you know. Um, so I think that was something that I was kind of craving in a way, and I'm grateful to have in my life here. But yeah, definitely also part of me was like, I wouldn't mind keep going. And everyone else was like, what? Like, we're ready to go back to regular life. And I was like,
Yeah, grapes and brownies. That's a good combo. It's like that's like a good like luxury food item. That's when you find out like, oh, I don't have an oven to like make this
yeah,
brownie. Um, it's sort of like the idea behind it of like what was difficult that you couldn't have on the trail. But also like kind of what you're alluding to is like you find out just how much you need like when you go on the trail and you find out that you don't actually need that much to survive or maybe I'll make a leap here and say like just to be happy,
yeah,
right? Whereas like, when you come back to society, you're like constantly being bombarded with all the things that like people are telling you that you do need in order to be happy. And so like it's cool to see like the contrast of that, like when you go in the woods and you're like, wow, like I don't need that much.
for sure. It makes you want to be more minimalist with your possessions and yeah, like purchasing less things. I definitely thought about that.
Hmm. And so like going through all these like national parks or like wildlife areas, um, do you see like any like measures from like conservation sites or national parks um, to that they like try to put up or uphold to handle all this traffic, like for like yourselves, like the backpackers or like just people in general, like going throughout the park, like on a day hike or something, like how, like do you see any like environmental measures that they put up
Well, let me just
to
put on
prevent
my
that?
National Park Service hat as a past employee. I can
Yeah.
tell you all about it. Yeah, I mean, I love the National Park Service and just the parks in general in the United States. They do a great job. All the rangers I met specifically on the John Muir Trail were fantastic. They had so much information, give you good advice about, yeah, like minimizing impact and leave no trace. But they also maintain the trails very well. They make it easy to go out in the woods and not leave a trace because there's already a nice trail that you can follow. And yeah, even for like day hikers when we were road tripping to, for instance, Bryce Canyon and Zion. They have like great shuttle systems set up in Zion so that it minimizes the impact of the cars. I think, yeah, the National Park Service does a great job with making sure that people can access the outdoors and for minimal cost without big impact.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like a gem of the United States, the Park Service.
I really like those shuttles that go through,
Yeah.
just in terms of transportation goes, because you like really high trafficked national parks like Yellowstone, you'll see a bunch of people in their cars driving through,
Yeah.
and you just think like that's a huge impact and a huge footprint. Whereas if you have a shuttle that's like mass transit throughout, um, this is a broader topic too, like just not even in national parks, just like having more public transportation systems within the US is would be a lot more helpful, I think. But it's not the sexiest of answers, right? Because it's like you want things to be super high tech and like maybe you want your privacy too, in which like you have self-driving cars. But but it solves and it works like really good solutions. Have just having a public mass transit
Yeah,
system.
definitely. But after road tripping 6,000 miles across the West, I did realize that, yeah, there's just so much space. So, so places like, well, maybe in the future, but like Idaho and Wyoming, it does seem like as of now the best way to get around is by car, unfortunately. Especially if you want to see like specific things, like a small hot spring in Stanley, Idaho. I could understand why Americans really like their cars,
Mm.
because it's, yeah, it's just so spread out. It's not like Barcelona where it's like a tiny city with old infrastructure. It's kind of, yeah, just like thousands of miles of
Mm.
plains. But yeah, maybe in the future.
And I think like to what you're saying, like just as a foundational point, like you are the backpacker or you are the person interacting with the national park and like just watching your own actions and what you do, whether you litter or you don't litter or like you mess with this vegetation or that vegetation, like that's already a huge part of the pie or the equation there of like having wildlife precautions or measures, safety measures. Um, and it's so simple, right? Because like it's something that we all could just make a decision on doing or
Yes,
not doing.
definitely. And yeah, that's another thing. Yosemite does a good job of bear prevention. I guess the goal is to make sure that bears don't start eating human food and then having to get aggressive. So they have bear boxes everywhere. I'm sure
Mm.
you've seen them. And so they even fine you if you leave food in your car because the
Mm.
bear will try and break into your car. So they do a really good job, and it's all to protect the bears.
Mm.
Also to protect humans, of course, so there's not aggressive encounters with bears. But I think that's really cool how they are trying to, yeah, keep efforts like that going.
Mm. Because like with the bears, right? They have to relocate them or
Either
something like that.
relocate or ultimately put them out if they are
Mm.
still being aggressive. And that's all because maybe a human left some food on the picnic table and then
Mm.
the bear wants to go back and then it starts trying to attack people's tents or something. So, yeah, it really comes down to humans being careful and making those choices, like you said.
That's such an interesting and like difficult dynamic to have human interaction with like wildlife or like
Yeah.
wild places, right? Wild areas. Like if we mess it up to a point where like we keep getting this animal to come back, now we have to put them down. Or like if we mess with the water system too much, like too much pollution or something like that, and now nobody else can enjoy it, right? Or it just requires a lot of like cleanup
Yep.
efforts from people to come
Yeah.
and clean up before. So it's like I would say a significant portion of the equation is just like our own actions.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this is a little bit of a controversial take, but I think like humans as kind of the top of the food chain, like we were given a Dominion mandate to like take care of the earth. And yeah, part of that's like environmental engineering, like what I do, treating the wastewater, so not just like dumping it in the street
Mm.
and treating our drinking water so we're not getting sick and taking care of the animals and not over harvesting from the earth. But yeah, we kind of have that responsibility, I would say, as humans because we were like we're kind of at the top in some ways. So,
Mhm. Is this kind of what drew you into environmental engineering? Is like all this time outdoors, or like thinking about outdoors, or planning about trips
I
outdoors?
mean, I wasn't actually very outdoorsy as a kid. Like before, yeah, March 2020, I would run, dabble in running, but like I wasn't, yeah, I'd never been backpacking. I'd only gone camping a few times as a kid. So I wouldn't say I was like actually an outdoorsy person. What got me into environmental engineering was when I was in high school, I volunteered with the oceanography department at the Naval Academy, which was near my house. And it's involved a lot of going out on a boat and taking water quality
Mhm.
samples in the Chesapeake Bay. And I just thought it was the most fun thing ever. I was like, how can I do this like every day? And I got some advice to major in environmental engineering to have kind of the technical portion and like field work kind of opportunities. And then I kind of just fell into cleaning up water because I found that very helpful to people and very interesting chemistry and physics and biology. So that was kind of how that happened. But I think I just got more outdoorsy along the way. Yeah, kind of just fell into it.
Would you say a lot of your focus area is on water treatment?
Yeah, so the job I just started this Tuesday is environmental design engineer in Boulder, working on water and wastewater treatment and infrastructure design. So for a lot of like small towns in Colorado, improving their treatment systems and yeah, helping keep our water safe.
Hmm. Is it like more like pollution watch, or would you say it's more like desalination or like
Yeah, it's
creating clean
more
water?
engineered system. So it's not like we're going to a stream and cleaning up the water there. That would be more like remediation, which environmental engineers also do.
Mhm.
Mine is more like so the water that goes down your toilet when you flush goes to the treatment plant, and so the treatment plant right now maybe has a bunch of different processes it uses to clean the water, like sedimentation, which just settles the water, and like a grit screen to remove particles. Okay, it's kind of gross, wastewater, but
Mm.
and then different processes to remove everything from the water so we can discharge it back into a stream.
Yeah.
So kind of improving the processes, especially as more regulations are added to the U.S. so we can make sure our water is safe. So it's kind of that side of things, not so much going out into nature and cleaning stuff up.
Mm.
But that's also a field of work.
I just think like not many people think about it, like
Yeah,
because it's so behind the scenes, right? Like treating water, or like,
we take it for granted.
right, when you, like you said, flush your toilet, we don't think about it, what, like where it goes afterwards. Yes, um it's a little like gross to think about, but I think it's very necessary though, that being said, because it's like, how do we get more drinkable water after this, or how do we get
Yeah.
clean water
Yep.
rather, beyond this point? Because like using water is so easy, and like when you, especially for us in like modernity, you just like turn on a faucet and you have water, right? Or you turn on a pump and you have like agriculture, that you can water agriculture with, or irrigation. But I think just like the people that aren't involved in it, which is I think the majority of people in the US, right? Because like it is a product, and it's just like people enjoy the product afterwards. But like those that are actually in it, like it's so fascinating.
Yes. Yeah, it's definitely something that when I started to learn about it in my undergraduate classes, I was like, this is so cool. And yeah, there's just a lot of work to do on the policy side as well. But I was more interested in specifically engineering, like how can we create solutions. And yeah, it feels very fulfilling as well. But yeah, another kind of controversial take. People think water should be free,
Mm.
and it would be great if it was, but yeah, it takes a lot of money to design and operate these treatment plants, and especially when there's more regulations, we have to upgrade them. And so people are like, oh, why is my water bill so expensive? Well, yeah, unfortunately, it's not free. It costs the state or whatever to make your water clean. And so, yeah, definitely, I think if people had more education about appreciation for what it takes to clean your water and then to remove your wastewater, I think it would help.
Why do people think water should be free?
Well, it seems like maybe people say like a human right, like, oh, everyone should have clean water. And I definitely agree, everyone should have clean water. And if you're not able to pay for it, okay, that's a different story, sure. Like, maybe there should be some subsidies and help for them. But I think, yeah, in general, it seems like, oh, like air we breathe is free, so why shouldn't water be free? Well, unfortunately, there's so many humans that, yeah, we pollute the water. Like, if we were left without a water and a wastewater treatment plant, it would be like the time in Europe when there was all sorts of diseases going on. Yeah, so we can't go back to that. So we need to invest in these infrastructure that costs money.
It's interesting because like you're kind of saying it takes so much effort, like human capital and labor to make the water clean essentially, or to keep it clean. And so that's kind of like why we need to pay for water. And like unfortunately, right? Like everybody would want to say, oh, like it's really romantic idea to say like, oh, it's free. Yeah. That's free, this is free. But like at the end of the day, if somebody's putting their effort and energy into making it clean for you as a product, then it's difficult to say like, oh, I'm not going to pay this person for their work.
Yeah. It was interesting to think about it, even back to hiking the John Muir Trail. So like okay, it's kind of gross. You dig a hole every time you go to the bathroom. Yeah. But if everybody was doing that, like the trail is going to end up being absolutely disgusting. Like if everybody in the whole world was doing that, I guess, yeah, that it would not be a sustainable way. So it's kind of interesting to think about, yeah, what are the sustainable solutions? Like we currently have water-based wastewater systems. So when you flush the toilet, water comes down to like flush everything out. Mm-hmm. But that uses a lot of water as well. So there's kind of other solutions where it would be kind of more like digging a hole where you don't use water. But yeah, so there is all kind of about like sustainability. How can we take care of this earth and not pollute it and be able to enjoy living in it, but come up with those solutions and fund them as well.
That's interesting. Like in the trails, is there any precautions for waste management, like waste or water management?
They limit how many people can hike on the trails. I think that's the biggest one. So I had to get a permit to hike the John Muir Trail. I think if they just let loose and let everybody go, it would get trashed. I think we've seen that happen here in Colorado in like Aspen or just in general. So many people here, the trails start to get worn more, they become bigger and they're impacting the environment. So the biggest way to limit humans is to just have a permit system. Yeah, there is such a thing as a wag bag. Now that I'm getting into the details, it's basically you poop into a bag and then you carry that with you so you do not impact the nature. It's only required on one part of the John Muir Trail. It's told it to use the wag bag. It's on Mount Whitney because it's so rocky. There's nowhere you could dig a hole, and it would just stay there for a long time and be disgusting.
So I guess like the big thing is just limitation.
Yeah,
of people.
I think for some of these trails, like there's not. You could also have backcountry toilets, but someone would have to go and clean them every once.
Is this just sort of like a porta potty in the middle of the woods?
Yeah, there's a lot of different options. When I worked at Yosemite, I worked on a backcountry composting toilet. So it was completely in the backcountry, but we had to use pack mules to bring out all our construction equipment when we designed and constructed it. But it was composting, so it would kind of make a smaller pile of waste, which would compost over time. And they would have someone clean it like every once in a while. So there's that kind of option, and there's more kind of the porta potty where it's not composting. You just kind of have to haul out all of that waste, which is also very either time consuming, or it will use pack mules or helicopters or humans and just like hauling the bag. So yeah, it's just a complicated solution, something I'm kind of interested in. There's all sorts of places that have to deal with these challenging waste situations.
That's interesting because like if you go to like major events or concerts and they have a bunch of porta potties lined out, it's easy because like the car can haul those out because there's, you can go on highways and traffic and get out. But if you have porta potties in the woods, how, like you said, how do you get in there? Like, do you
Yeah.
have to use a helicopter to go in
It's
and get
so
out?
expensive if you do that.
Yeah,
So
or
yeah.
like haul it out yourself, even,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which I don't think is the most efficient way, but
They do it.
yeah.
Yeah, Yosemite actually, yeah, they were wrestling when I was working for design and engineering there. They were wrestling with that problem of too many people are using the backcountry toilets, but if we don't have them, they're just going to dig holes and it's going to become disgusting. So we need to have one, but we have to have employees come and haul it out. Normally with pack mules, but sometimes even just the employees will haul it out. And it was happening so often because there's so many tourists coming
Mm.
to these like slightly backcountry, like maybe 5 miles off the road, kind of, or maybe a bit more, like 10 miles, kind of areas. And so that's where the composting toilet, you need to haul it out less because it composts over time and the product can be used for other things. So yeah, it's a very interesting problem. Something that kind of like intersects my interests in environmental engineering and outdoors.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I honestly, for me, I didn't even know there was so much interest for like going into national parks or going into this outdoorsy lifestyle. I think when I was growing up, I was just seeing people, like the people that wanted to go in the woods were like very niche, because like the minority people want to like go out because you're away from your comforts, right? And like you have to survive on your own. Like that's it takes a lot of effort and like forethought and planning to do that. But like getting to see now, especially like throughout the pandemic, just like how much interest there actually is in like people going out and like trying to do things outdoors or buying equipment or getting permits like yourself. Like just it's just interesting how many people are actually going out there.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. We live on a beautiful planet, and it's good to get out of the confines of four walls every
Mhm.
once in a while and sleep under the stars.
But again, like if you have so much interest, like you need to have these limitations, like you're saying, just so you don't destroy the thing that you
Exactly.
want to go out
Yeah.
and enjoy, right? Um, and part of that is wastewater treatment, um, whether it be in the big cities or out in the woods, which is a very interesting process there. Um, and so, like, I guess when you see like so many people, like, because I'm just like going to Yellowstone, right? Just like seeing how many people are there and like how many people come off of tour buses and like start taking pictures of everything. Um, like, how many of those people are like damaging the area that they're in currently, and like what can we do to prevent that?
There's stories about bison, moles, and other tourists who walk too close to it in Yellowstone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you see a lot of that. Yeah, I think people just need to be mindful and respectful and good to educate yourself where you can about. Yeah, when I first started backpacking, that first trip, March 2020, we definitely were completely clueless. So, yeah, imagine like throwing mandarin orange peels like on the trail. Like that was basically me. Oh, we brought a Bluetooth speaker.
Mm-hmm.
We were those people. We're playing music on the trail.
Nice.
So, yeah, I've learned a lot over time about how to like use this hobby respectfully to yeah, be like careful to leave no trace and
Yeah.
appreciate it more. So I think over time, I'm good to.
Isn't that funny? Like so many people in the city are just like, "Oh, it's biodegradable." Just like
Yeah.
throw this apple core on the ground, and it should be okay.
Yeah, it takes like probably 5 or 10 years or something. So you're gonna be staring at it for the next 5 or 10 years if you
Hmm.
leave it there. So
Yeah, because I was just like I was that was my idea. It was just like, oh, like what? It's fruit, right? It's fruit going back into nature, or like eggshells or meat going back into nature, right? Because you're not throwing. Like the more obvious thing is like if you're throwing a wrapper on the ground, you're like, oh, okay, we probably shouldn't do that. But like the greenery or like the agricultural stuff, whether it be like fruits and veggies, is like, oh, like maybe that does work.
yeah, better to pack out everything where you can. So yeah, that's what I've learned over time too.
Hmm. For sure. And so like I know that you said you were from Maryland there growing up, um, and kind of getting to see like different parts of the US as you're moving around. Um, I guess like what was it like growing up in Maryland? And then what is it like seeing different places after?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I spent my first 22 years in Maryland in Annapolis, which is the capital, but it's not a huge city actually, much smaller than Baltimore or DC, which are nearby. It's a college town with a naval academy, but it was once the capital of the U.S. back in 17 or 1800s for a short period of time. It's very like historic. It's on the water on the Chesapeake Bay. And I was actually homeschooled, so my mom taught me at home, and me and my brother. And yeah, had a really great childhood. Very grateful to have grown up there. Went to a Christian school for high school, and then went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland, for undergrad for 4 years. So yeah, spent a lot of time. I don't know, just exploring my backyard or reading books, kind of standard homeschooled child things before all the electronics. And I also spent a decent amount of time on the water. So I have a kayak. My family has one. It's 13 feet long, so it has fit all 4 people in my family because we're pretty small. So I spent a lot of time like on the river in my boat, and just really grateful to have grown up there. I still love Maryland. I was just there last week. Got the opportunity to move out to Boulder for grad school, and love the mountains as well. There's just so much beauty here in Colorado, and really challenged to meet. I don't know if the people are like why they're different, but just the people I've met in Boulder since moving here have really grown and challenged me. Oddly, have met more international people in Boulder, but I think it was because I lived in an international house. I think in that sense, kind of opened my horizons to move out to Colorado and make a lot of good friends who were challenging and growing me. And so I think it's been and that was kind of why I wanted to stay in Boulder after grad school, is I found really good community, and of course the mountains, like how can you not enjoy that? So grateful.
Homeschooling, like I've always wondered what it would be like to be homeschooled, because
All the stereotypes are true. Maybe. Most of them actually were true for me.
I think like just coming from like a public school background, I think there's like that's just all I knew. But I think like if you talk about efficiency, maybe it is more efficient to be homeschooled. Maybe you like absorb information or like better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as efficient for your mom because she has to stay home, or your dad, whoever's teaching you. They give a huge sacrifice, so that's something I'm always grateful for, that my parents are willing to do that for me, especially my mom. Because I think school is more efficient in the sense that all the kids can just go there and the parents can work and one person can teach a whole bunch of kids, but having that one-on-one or one-on-two with my brother, specialized education, I think I was grateful for. And I think it does help you be more self-motivated because you need to do work yourself and you're not always being monitored if your mom's busy or something. But overall, I would just say it was really happy. Just imagine you don't have to worry about what anyone else thinks of you, basically, because you're not surrounded by other kids who are judging you. I mean, I've never gone to public school, so I actually can't really speak to that. But I did go to private school for high school, and so prior to that, I think I was just very, very happy. It was a good childhood, and I would definitely recommend people think about it if they have the opportunity.
Is there anything that you think you want, or maybe you thought you missed that public schools would provide that maybe more homeschool or private education didn't?
I mean, my geography is pretty bad. I don't know, somehow I was just skipped. I probably don't know the names of half of the countries in the world. Okay, maybe not half, but there's a lot of places that I maybe just didn't learn about. Somehow that was lost in there. But I think that I can learn over time. Maybe some learning to get along with different types of people. I think I became kind of judgmental as a homeschooler. I definitely thought I was smarter than like any public schooler. I was like, I'm homeschooled, so so I think some of that trait of like pride is something I'm still like having to learn to let go of, and yeah, value different types of people and more diversity and stuff like that. I think yeah, growing up sheltered, I guess, kind of made me sort of judgmental. Whereas maybe you would have, yeah, a more open view of the world if you grew up with other different types of people. But yeah, I think I never wished that I was like at public school. Or maybe there were small periods of time, but like I don't look back on it and be like, oh, if only I'd gone to public school. So,
Interesting. Okay. It's so interesting because um, that's what I was gonna say too. Like it's the social aspect. That's a big thing that I see now from public school is that you get all these interactions, and like you said, like not all interactions are positive, obviously, and so like if you actually get um enough negative interactions, then like it'll really turn you off, or
yeah.
like it could really affect your mental health. Whereas like the also on the opposite side is like homeschooling is like if you don't get enough social interaction, and that's completely upon you, right? Like you choose to, and maybe you get plenty more, maybe you get like more deeper interactions too, right? Who knows? Like maybe you get more, like the friends that you know are deeper connections than like those in public school, because it's sort of in public school you know that there's going to be a transition, there will be a transition in like the next couple of years, and people like, because it's kind of like a funnel, right? It's like small, it's like every couple of years somebody else will go to like a different school nearby, and then as you move up towards like high school or college, those people start funneling into the rest of the world now, right? And so you kind of like disappear in that way. But whereas if you're like homeschooled, maybe like the connections that you make throughout that time, like they're just much more deeply rooted.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be able to compare since I didn't go to public school. I, yeah, there definitely is that social aspect. But yeah, I mean, you can get that later too. Like, I think 0 to 14, like, you're forming your worldview, and you're like a sponge to whatever is around you. And I think I was grateful to have a good like foundation in that period of time. And yeah, now I can have more friends.
Yeah.
And yeah, not to say I didn't have any friends, but definitely probably less social interaction. But I think I turned out okay. So yeah, but yeah, I think it was worth it for just having a good foundation when you're young and impressionable.
Yeah. So was there any sort of like transition periods when you needed to go into like college, for example, or any like
Yeah,
groups like that?
definitely. I mean, so I joined the private school actually in eighth grade, which was a rough year. I think for everyone, eighth grade or
Yeah.
middle school was hard. But I was just totally, even the private school, which was smaller than public school, I was very shocked. I was like, I felt like kind of different, I guess. But I think everybody kind of goes through that like identity crisis, like who am I? Like, do people care about me? Kind of thing in middle school, high school, even. Like you're still trying to become like grow into yourself, maybe. So of course there was that, and then in college, met a lot of like-minded people. Just really deep and down to earth people. So it felt like I hadn't really missed out on anything. Like if I had not as many like deep friends before that, like yeah, you're always meeting new people and can have lifelong friends at any stage of life. So met a lot of solid people in college, and yeah, I didn't really feel like there was that much. I do always say though that like I can identify other homeschoolers, and like
How do you do that?
they look like a homeschooler. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Like you can tell from like their
Is it like a behavioral thing, you think?
maybe just the things they talk about or like
Huh.
background.
Okay, because I'm an only child, right? And so like there's different connotations to that as well. And I think sort of like, do you think it's sort of like that in that
Yeah,
sense?
I think something like that. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna get into trouble if I start classifying homeschoolers.
Yeah.
But yeah, they, I don't know. I feel like just when you find other people who are raised the same way as you, like
Mm.
whether it's like from your ethnic background or, yeah, just like the way that you were taught, I think there is some kind of bond that occurs just like any other friendship starter, like some common sport or something.
Mm.
It's just something in common that you have. Maybe specifically, well, most homeschoolers are Christian, so Christian homeschooled kids, like we kind of, there's just something you can identify about them, at least for me. So,
Mm.
yeah, I do feel like in that sense, um, yeah, once homeschooled, you're always homeschooled, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting thought about homeschool versus public private school.
Yeah. Like there's so much in public school that's like negative too, for sure, because it's just like the stuff that you're being taught, or like because everybody's going at different paces, like how do you tailor that education, because now you're kind of having like a program to feed the masses, rather than a program that's specific and unique towards you. Like maybe your parents um, see that you're interested in something and they want to like push on that a little bit more, and so they can tailor it in that way, and where like courses will come kind of specifically tailored to those ideas or whatever you're interested in, rather than like in a public school system where it's just like lecture based and it's like you could get anything. um and so it's like potentially like you're getting a much more quality like tailored education, which is an idea for like universities and colleges, like because you know how when you go in and you pick a degree, that you may not be able to pick certain classes that you may be interested in or like what you're trying to strive for. And so that's an interesting concept for like what if students got to tailor their own degree and like create something out of it instead of like having a one size fit all type education.
That is, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess I haven't thought too much about that, but I definitely was grateful that, yeah, the specific things I was interested in, my mom definitely wanted me to grow in. I think she definitely also had her own agenda that I needed to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer,
Mm.
and I guess worked out for her. But she
Mm.
became an engineer. But so maybe she's also kind of like, oh, pushing me in a
Yeah.
certain direction. But yeah, I think it is definitely nice to be able to have that like one-on-one time with your parents and they know you best. So
Yeah. Um, I think with most parents, I wouldn't say every parent, but with most parents, I think they push uh, for a reason, and it's like they want to push you in a good direction, right? Essentially. But like, did you ever feel pressure from that experience?
not like unhealthily, no. I
Mm.
think, yeah, like you said, parents want the best for you. And I think like seeing my dad, who is a researcher, professor of physics, was also very inspiring to me to pursue STEM, just to see his passion for what he does. I wanted to find that for myself. And my mom's pushing was more like, oh, she'd send me to engineering camp or something. And then turns out I did like it. So it wasn't like she was like, you have to do this. It was more just, oh, I'll expose you to this. And
Mm.
that helped. So yeah, I don't think it was like unhealthy pressure. It's more just like, we hope that you like this. And I did. So
I think that's a much more healthy mindset to go at it from, because I think the other way is not sustainable.
yeah.
Whereas like you're coerced into doing something and then you find out you really dislike it throughout, and you're like, why do we spend all this money? Why do we spend
Yeah.
all this time to do something that I wasn't actually even interested in?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Well, with all this like traveling and backpacking, right? Like, does that like do you think about pushing beyond the borders of like backpacking, and do you ever think about like traveling abroad?
Yeah, that was an interesting question. Yeah, I think yeah, the last 2 years I lived in an international house in Boulder. I am personally not international, but I kind of ended up there, and it was people from all around the world. And I did kind of start to question, like, so why have I never actively sought out to like study abroad or like living abroad? And I kind of realized like it was because I'm kind of scared.
Mm.
Like it, all those international students who I lived with were really taking a leap of faith and like um, humbling themselves, I guess, to come to a culture where they didn't know what was normal and have to be able to laugh at themselves. And that's something that like I'm really bad at laughing at myself. I kind of put up walls of like, oh no, I need to be above reproach. Like I don't want anyone to laugh at me.
Mm.
And I feel like that was something that kind of I realized into living in Boulder with all these people who were so open and adventurous and willing to try new things. And I was like, maybe that's why I'm like afraid of going somewhere else where where I don't fit in. We all have that desire to fit in. So yeah, I was like thinking about it, and I think it would definitely be cool to live. I think specifically Southeast Asia, where my mom is from, like Malaysia or Singapore. I would like to go out there and experience some new things. Maybe work in water, wastewater kind of stuff. Maybe brush up my Chinese or my Malay, and yeah, kind of get out of my comfort zone more. But yeah, I think I'm just for now just listening to where God puts me, and if that's in my future, I'd be really excited. But yeah, I haven't done much traveling abroad other than visiting family and just like, yeah, small fun things, not so much like intentionally going outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah, like going out of your comfort zone, feeling scared, and like logistics, right? Like the reality is like there's a lot of logistics. Um, it makes it for like a difficult thing to achieve or to do, right? Is like I think it's one thing to travel abroad and kind of like see different cultures and people, but it's another thing to like live, like actively live there for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Whereas like like those students that were staying here in the U.S. At the international house, like that is such a huge leap of faith, right? Because
Yeah.
then once you're in the U.S., how are you going to get funding? How are you going to like survive? Like, are you going to get along with like the culture and like the
Yeah.
people around? So it is a huge step. Um, and I think, but again, on the same token, it's one that can be very, very rewarding too, just to get to see different cultures and people.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of back to like the aspect of, we think that what we do is right, but yeah, there's like different cultures that do things differently. And we can learn from that too. Like the American way is not the best way. Like there's so much to learn. So I think, yeah, it would definitely be good to grow more in that and be less concerned about like whether people laugh at me or not, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, I think that wraps it up for me. But I just want to say how much of a pleasure it was to be able to sit down and just have this conversation. I think you're a very like interesting and adventurous person, and yeah, I just really appreciate your time and coming on.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, this was cool. Thank you for taking the time to be interested in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.